Hello everyone. Today we're going to unpack the single cockpit cell. It's a bit of a highlight because for me it's the single most amazing part on the D7. And after the demo we'll share a bit of why we believe that, including some background and also behind the scenes stuff. Now before we dive straight into it, a couple of quick heads up. First of all, the single cockpit cell scores a max on the scale from easy to trickiness. But then there's every reason to be confident and it's quite fun to do. In terms of timing, the first time I did it, that fun lasted about 20 minutes. So that's a good indication. Now Thanasis does it in 5, but then that's because he designed it. The demo is about 27 minutes, but that's because it's fully uncut from start to finish and also the first take. So unlike that engine click, which took me like 7 times to get the right solid click. And of course, doing things and then showing it clearly takes a bit of getting used to. It's also why I chose to provide it audio commentary, because like doing 3 things at the same time for now, it's a bit of too much of an ask. Maybe we get up to that point sometime, but until then, here we go. So for our single cockpit cell, we work from the front to the back and outside in. And most of the supports are organized into so-called a pillar or a column, which is just a vertical 3D scaffolding with a number of supports linked to it. And the whole idea is that with a fine tweezer, you loosen up all the supports of a particular column, and once it's loose, and you can then wiggle it a bit, then with a rougher tweezer you just peel it off. Now these first 2 you saw me undoing are fairly simple because all the supports are located at the top. So it's fairly easy to determine when it's loose, but this one here, I think there are some supports which are a little bit in between or halfway. So you always need to use your visor to first check where the supports are located to loosen it up. And then once everything is freed up, like here, you take the rougher tweezer and you just peel it off. So here's another one. Oops, I took the wrong tweezer. So here's another support where the supports are not all at the top, but also somewhere in between. Yep, Christian, that's the right one. And then again, you look up with the visor. Here you take a couple of the top and then you wiggle at the middle until everything is loose. Now I'm being very careful here. Even if I would rip it off by hand, there's a good chance that it would break at the support rather than at the frame. But then obviously you want to be very careful. It's just to highlight that everything has been carefully engineered so that you can be confident. So yeah, the pillar is loose and then you peel it off again. And that's how you progress all the way along. So now I'm gonna work up, here I just took up some leftovers. So now I'm gonna work up the sides and loosen them up. Same principle again, you use a fine tweezer to pinch off those supports until you feel, yep, there's one loose again. You take the rougher one and you peel it off. Same thing. So this is a pillar with 4 supports. Now what you'll notice is that sometimes it doesn't always break off all the way at the bottom. Let's see how this works. Yeah, here it does, but if not, as you see there are little points, then in the interim you have a bit of let's say housekeeping to do to keep everything nice and clean so that they have the necessary freedom to continue. So here we work up the other side, same principle again. You wiggle with a fine tweezer to make sure the supports are loose, always checking whether there are no supports somewhere halfway. You check if something is loose and then you peel it off. So you see, it's all pretty much straightforward once you got the hang of it. So in a similar way, I'm now working up those sides. It's pretty loose. And it's peeled off. Here another one. So it's pretty much like peeling off an onion. So again, always the same principle. With a fine tweezer you loosen up the hyper-thin supports which are linked or attached to the frame, either at the top or somewhere in the middle. That's what the visor is for. You just check if a particular column is loose, and once it's loose, you can just peel it off. Here you see that the column doesn't peel off right at the bottom, so in that case you just have a bit of housekeeping to do. This one went nicely. Okay, so there are a little more on the side. This top one here, I forgot. Same principle. Just loosening up that halfway. And then with the rougher tweezer, yeah, here too it broke off halfway, so here too there's a housekeeping to do afterwards. That's always what you want to do, just to keep a clean desk, so to speak. So that you have the freedom to look what's next up. Yeah, you see the resin is really flexible, so sometimes it doesn't peel off, so you need to cut it. Just checking. We're moving along fine. So now we're gonna move up and clean up a couple more on the sides in the next layer. Always the same principle. Loosen up the supports with the fine tweezer. You could also use a knife to dab it off in a similar way as we discussed in the tools section. Now I'm doing this very carefully. That's why it's taking so long. Here too you see that everything is loose, and now what you see me doing is an alternative. If a support is loose, you could also cut it off rather than peel it off. Here I'm doing a little housekeeping. You see, sometimes it's really flexible, and then it's maybe better just to use a nipper. Like I'm using here. So there's no risk of tension because everything is loose from the top. It's just a matter of to more quickly, instead of peeling it off as I'm doing here, just to make sure that all the supports are nice and clean downwards. So now I'm doing the other side, the second inner layer. Supports are loose. Take the rougher one and peel it off. Loosen up everything with the fine tweezer until everything is loose. And here too, I use that alternative method. Everything is loose anyhow. So rather than peel it off, it breaks off and then you can take it out. There are different ways to skin the cat. You see, I take it out. That's something, we'll show that later on as we work up inwards, because then it becomes a little bit more tricky. But before we do that, we just need to remove a couple on the front here in the second line. As you'll see here, now I'm wiggling, but the support is higher than the frame. So you want to cut it off rather than peel it out, because then you risk hitting the frame. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cutting it off, and then halfway you see me taking it out. It's a bit of a safer way, because peeling it off like those outsides, which are really free to do, here you risk hitting the frame. It's especially for the ones that sit in the middle there, which we will do next. And again, that's because the supports sit higher, or at least the column is higher than parts of the frame. Yeah, it's a bit of an effort to make sure to do it, and at least to make sure it's clear to show it. That's why it's taking me quite a long time, because normally this goes way quicker. So here we're almost up to those, yeah, here I'm showing it to you. So those couple which sit inside the frame. So in a similar way, you loosen them up, but rather than peeling them off and pulling them outside, as I showed you earlier, you want to cut them halfway, so they come more easily out without breaking the frame. Yeah, here the supports are all loose, but you see they sit higher than the frame, so I cut it halfway, either with a fine one or a thicker one, and then you can just take them outside halfway, as I'm doing here. Same here. And now I'm using the thicker one. There's no risk of tension. And then I think we're almost done with the front. I think one left to go. Here you can clearly see that the supports sit higher than the bottom of the frame. Yeah, so now everything is loose. I cut it up in the middle. And I need to take the thicker one because... Oop. Just one last bit. And then the front is pretty much done. So now I'm doing a little housekeeping, which you always want to do just to make sure that everything is nice and clean. Not the disc itself apparently, but just the part. The disc you need to clean up too. And then here you see we've pretty much become halfway. So the frame, the engine bay part is now fully loose. So on to the next stage. So here we've reached the midpoint. I'm first going to chock off that base plate just to create some room so that everything is nice and free to move along. And then it's a matter of releasing the wing spar. So what I'm just doing, I'm taking a knife here just to chuck off the first one so that the chisel is more positioned rightly to go all the way through. And then I kind of like that chisel I bought because it allows you to slide it all the way through. And then, well, you can take it off by hand as I'm doing here, or use the tweezer, or cut it off on the bottom with a nipper. I mean, again, there are many ways to skin the cat. Here again, chuck off the first one to place the chisel in a correct way, and then slide it all the way through. Yeah, so here are the alternative. Cut it off a bit. There's no risk of tension, and then you just take it off. And that's how you... yeah, so here you have those supplementary parts. It's the side of the oil tank, and then later on in the real video, the definite video, I'll explain why we opened up the sides. So now I'm continuing to release the wing spars. Chuck off, or at least open up the first so the chisel is well positioned, and then you slide it all the way through. Same thing on the other side. Use the chisel to slide it through, and then it's again a matter to take off either by hand or by tweezer. Yeah, sometimes the tweezer doesn't, because it's so flexible. You'll find your way what's most appropriate. So yeah, I'm doing it by hand now. Okay, so now next thing is the bridge. So you cut off, the bridge is something that supports the oil tank, and it's 4 thick support, so you just cut off the base. So that's the second one, and then there are 2 further back. Yeah, now here I'm first releasing the base plate again to create more room. Same thing on the other side. Yeah, I'm cutting those bridges again. Yep. So, click off the bridge. Then take off the base plate where we've foreseen these large holes so that it's easy to clip them off. And then, so the bridge are the supports that hold up the oil tank. And then the idea is that you just slide them through from one side. Yeah, here I'm just doing something else now. I'm cleaning up the bottom plate to make more room. Here you can be pretty rough, so I'm using a chisel, but you could use a knife or whatever, or even your hands to push them through. So here I'm using my hands. It's all pretty flexible. And then once they're released on the bottom, you can use the nipper again because there's no tension. Or the tweezer. Many alternatives. All the way up to the point where there's this hole again. So then the idea is that you cut off the base plate again. So here I'm continuing to remove everything from the bottom plate. Yeah, so now I'm jumping back and forth. So now I'm going to loosen up the supports which also are linked to the bridge. And actually what you want to do, which I'm not doing here, is then once they're removed, you cut them with a nipper on the bottom because they will sit in the way to nicely take the bridge out of the frame, because they will always block on one side or the other. So this is what I'm now doing. So releasing those supports which are linked to the bridge. They're here, the 2. So they are loose now. Yeah, I'm trying to pull them out, but then, as I said, it blocks on the other side. So they're all pretty loose now. Yep, so now I got the point. Better late than never. And then I cut them off so that they don't sit in the way when you pull them out from the side. Yeah, now I'm trying to pull it out, but then the other side is still on the top. Yes, Christian, you got it. So I cut those off too, and then it should be pretty straightforward. Then you take out the bridge, or it even falls out. You see, this is the bridge. So those are the supports that hold up the oil tank. So once that's out of the way, we clean up the bottom a little further, I think. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Again, you can be pretty rough. You see, I'm not following a strict sequence here because I already started working on the back part to release the side columns. Again, you peel them off like an onion. Yeah, now I'm back, you see, and I'm even doing it by hand. And that's because we've foreseen these large holes, so the risk of tension is very limited. And then what you want to do, because now we've reached the back part, it's to basically remove the backside behind the seat wall. And this is what Tanas has learned me. Here I'm using a chisel, but you could also use like what I'm going to use now next, that knife, and you cut along the back of the seat wall to make them all loose. And then again, because they're all loose, you can either take them off by hand, peel them off with a tweezer like I'm doing here, or cut them with a nipper. You see, I'm doing it a little bit further because maybe I've not gone all the way to the bottom. And again, you can be at the beginning, if you're more careful, that's fine. So you don't have to be rough from the start, but it all is pretty straightforward. So now I'm doing the sides. Those are again more peel off type things. Here there may be supports which are linked at halfway, so you want to make sure that they're all loose before you start peeling them off, you see. Taking the big one again, and then, whoop, it's gone. Other side. Pretty much the same way, you nip off the top supports. You look if there's something halfway, you take the rougher tweezer and you just peel them off. And you work all your way through again here from the outside in. Yeah, now here I'm trying to further clean up the back part because you want that fully loose before you start at the grand finale. So here I'm working my way up further to the bottom. So you're basically cutting the feet underneath the cell. And then, yeah, either by hand, by tweezer, by nipper, you ensure that everything is cleaned up. Now here you want to keep the base plate because it gives you a good hold to do the last part, which you'll see me doing at the end. Here again, just those final ones which were not done all the way. And you see that all the way underneath the bottom of the frame, everything starts to be completely free. That's what you want to achieve. So here's some housekeeping again. So you end up with a number of supports which sit on the inside of the frame. Now here you have to take care to take the visor, because here the supports are, yeah, this is still one on the outside, so that's pretty safe. But the inner ones, they are all connected not only to the top but also halfway. Some of them are linked to the seat frame. But the whole idea is then once the outsides are gone, eventually the whole thing with the base plate will fall out underneath. So I'm here still preparing on the sides. I still have some work left on the bottom of the plate because there are still supports linked to the bottom of the frame. So that's what I'll be doing next, I think. No, I'm already starting to wiggle off the supports in the middle. Yeah, the sequence here I did also because I wanted to show it for the camera. Is maybe not the ideal one, but I think you pretty much get the point. So I'm starting to loosen up supports here within that middle part, one by one. And then if this was not also to show it to you, if you look with your visor and you're focused, then you can really finish that off so that all the supports are loose. Here it's a bit more trial and error. Okay, so now here you see there are still supports. Yeah, I'm not doing it yet. I'm still working on releasing those inner ones. Yeah, so that's fine too. Okay, so here you see there are still supports which are on the bottom of the frame. So those you want to free up first. That's what I'll be doing now. Just to make sure that the bottom is completely free. And once that's the case, you see you can be pretty rough. I'm doing it by hand here again, or a chisel, whatever is more comfortable. The only thing you need to make sure is that the whole base plate is relieved from the bottom of the frame. There's still a couple of, and then you see here that's the whole point in the end. You start, now the whole base plate is released from the back side of the frame, and then the whole idea in the finale is that you start wiggling and see where there are still supports left, you see? So I'm trying to wiggle. There are obviously still a couple of attachment points which are not released. So then with your visor you look which ones are still to be done. And then one by one, after all of them are released, in the end you'll see me, it falls out underneath the frame. Still a couple of left. It starts to get a bit looser now. See, we're almost there. Still a couple of left. And you do that carefully, of course. I mean, the thing is not to pull it out like a... Okay. So. Still a couple of left. Not quite there yet. Yeah, now we're there, you see, and it falls out underneath. And that's when you have built yourself, or at least cleaned up yourself, a nice cockpit cell. I think in about 20 minutes time, I think there's almost no cleanup to do.